Elizabeth Dent, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute and former Director for the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula in the Pentagon. Happy to host you on American Dialogues.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this week, President Trump has delayed a major escalation against Iran, and today they began attacking Iran again. What kind of options does the U.S. still retain to inflict a greater pain on Iran?
I think it depends. I mean, right now, the United States, just launched these strikes with Saudi Arabia against Iranian-aligned militia groups overnight. I think that points to the United States and some of the Gulf regional partners' willingness to engage with some of the Iranian proxy networks as one of its strategies. So reestablishing deterrence, bolstering air defenses, protection of U.S. forces, but also of regional partner forces. We could continue with precision strikes against the Iranians, but also the militia groups. So, plus the United States has also put back into place this purported blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. So obviously, there are options to shift this into a much larger military campaign with, boots on the ground, as they would say. But I think that would carry some pretty significant risks of escalation, of Iranian retaliation, and sort of a wider conflict, which we're starting to see anyway. But I think as of right now, the countries are really looking to maintain the level at which we are at and not have this spread into more of a regional war, although I think it remains to be seen whether or not that will actually happen.
So Iran-backed militias have used Iraqi territory to attack Saudi oil facilities, and that prompted Saudi Arabia to conduct targeted strikes against them. This week, you have worked on the ground in Iraq, and you understand how these militias operate. Should this be a wake-up call to the Iraqi government to accelerate their disarmament?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an issue that the United States has been working on with the Iraqis for a number of years. And honestly, the threat that the Iranian-aligned militia groups have posed in Iraq, not just to U.S. Forces that were based in Iraq and Syria, but also to our partners in Kuwait. Kuwait has been facing this threat for quite some time. They have been hit by a lot of the Iranian-aligned militias based in Iraq over the last couple of months. And so for them, I think this is sort of an existential threat. I think the Saudis have also faced some of these threats, but given that they targeted oil infrastructure this time around, I think the Saudis wanted to show that they were drawing a red line, that this is not acceptable. Frankly, with the new prime minister of Iraq, who just completed a visit here to Washington, D.C., and had a visit with President Trump in the Oval Office, this request of the Iraqi government to bring all of the militias underneath the umbrella of the government of Iraq has been a position that the United States has long taken. I think the question will be whether or not the government of Iraq is strong enough to make strides in bringing these militias to heel. In the past, we have seen that is not something that the prime minister has been able to accomplish, but it should be a wake-up call. And I guess we'll have to see what Prime Minister Zaidi moves ahead with doing. Already his trip to Saudi Arabia has been canceled. That is not a good look for him in the region. So again, there's a lot of things happening at one time right now, but certainly I would hope that this does invigorate the Iraqis to bring these militias to heel.
So unlike Iran or Yemen, the U.S. has a better, intelligence picture in Iraq. How exposed are these militias, their weapons stockpiles, their command centers, to further targeted strikes?
I mean, we do have a much better picture of sort of these threats in Iraq than we do in Yemen or than we do even in Iran. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where our efforts have been focused on over the last couple of years. We have not seen these attacks from Iranian-aligned militias from Iraq in a couple of years now. So, I think that this is something that CENTCOM is going to be able to pursue, but this is part of the regional security integration, where we have our regional partners all working together, and we work quite closely with the Iraqi military. So whether or not the Iraqi military and the United States military are identifying targets of these militias together, I'm not sure of, but my guess is that that's the next step.
So the Iraqi Shia leader, Muqtada Sadr, he condemned this week what he called the militia's brazen acts to drag Iraq into war. Do you think such rhetoric, such intervention will increase pressure in the Iraqi government?
I think it will increase pressure on the Iraqi government, and it will also help with some of the sympathies from the Iraqi population towards some of these militias. Muqtada al-Sadr is a very well listened to cleric, and so him coming out against these militias using Iraq as a launching pad for some of these attacks, I think will ultimately be a good thing and can help the Iraqi government gain support for bringing the militias under the umbrella of the government.
And how do you think Iran would respond to that?
I mean, I don't think that they'll respond well. They'll probably activate a lot of their networks and influence within Iraq in order to try to reverse some of this fervor that I think will be there in reaction to the U.S. and Saudi strikes. But certainly, there are still Iran and Iraq have had a close relationship for quite some time now, over the last 15 years. So I would not be surprised if the Iranians were to push back on that a bit.
So Iran has used the Houthis to threaten shipping through Bab el-Mandeb as part of its broad strategy of weaponizing vital choke points. Europe has faced criticism for its reluctance to support missions to restore maritime security. So with two straits under threat, do you think European countries may play or should play a stronger role?
I have long believed that European companies should play a stronger role in an international construct to reestablish freedom of navigation, whether it's in the Bab el-Mandeb or whether it's in the Strait of Hormuz, anywhere in the Red Sea. I think that the Europeans, but also many of the Asian countries, have a vested interest in ensuring that these vessels can move through without being attacked. And so I think this will be not just a European Western effort here. I think it has to be a global commitment with real skin in the game, including ships and intelligence and people, in order to really reestablish this ability to transit the seas.
So I believe the US and UK defense officials prepare to meet in London this week to discuss Hormuz. Do you think such a move would lead to a coalition in Hormuz or to secure maritime security in the whole Middle East?
I certainly hope so. These efforts to build coalitions in these waters have not failed per se, but have not been something that many countries could coalesce around. The bigger this Iranian threat and Iranian proxy threat grows to the shipping industry, I think that will continue to change. I think more countries will begin to coalesce around support for initiatives that can be supported by an international construct where many countries come together and can either help secure the safety of vessels transiting or provide deterrence measures or whatever the case may be. So yes, I think it's certainly possible that something could come out of these meetings. But again, I think it's got to be much larger than simply a Western effort. I think at this moment in time, the United States government, alongside with several other governments, should be pulling together ministers or cabinet level officials in order to discuss ways they could build a coalition to ensure that the freedom of navigation is restored.
Yes. So I want to go back to the Trump administration approach. So do you think, what goals do you predict is the United States seeking to achieve in Iran? Like, do you think that the Trump administration behavior now indicates that they want to topple the regime, or they just want to weaken it further?
I think initially the Trump administration wanted to topple the regime. They wanted to put an end to any sort of nuclear program. They wanted to cripple the ballistic and cruise missile programs, and those were really the top priorities laid out by the Trump administration before this war began. The way I think that has shifted is that the war has really become, at least for the Trump administration, all about getting the Strait of Hormuz reopened. And obviously that was not an issue prior to this war beginning, but that does seem to be the primary goal of the Trump administration now. I don't think regime change is a part of that anymore. I think, sometimes Trump will claim that he already changed the regime because he killed the supreme leader. I think we all know that that's not an accurate assessment of the situation. But between getting some sort of negotiation started on the Strait of Hormuz and some sort of agreement on the future of the Iranian nuclear program, those are probably the two primary goals that Trump has in his mind as of this moment in time.
Many have asked what would prompt China to pressure Iran to stop disrupting global shipping. Yet Reuters reported, I think today, that Iran will soon receive Chinese shoulder-fired missile systems. Does this suggest China is more concerned about preventing Iran defeat than restraining its behavior?
I think it's really difficult to tell. I think that China's support for Iran is very heavily driven by economics. And so they see the Iranians as purchasing something from them. And while, of course, the political implications are there, I think that they don't have any qualms about the United States engaging in a war in the Middle East that drags out its firepower, drags out its position, and makes the assets that the United States relies upon, more wear for the weather. So, I think it's just for them, it's they don't have a lot of skin in the game right now. Even though global shipping has been disrupted, Chinese don't seem to have been that terribly impacted by that, whether it's the price of oil or whether it is oil actually making it out of the Strait of Hormuz. So I think for them right now, there's not a high cost on either one. And again, they're happy to watch the United States expend themselves in the Middle East, as the United States has done over multiple conflicts now. So I think for them it's a low risk, high reward situation.
Yeah. So I will conclude, with one question about your predictions.
Okay.
Do you think that this war will continue until the midterms, or the Trump administration at some point would go back to negotiations?
Well, the Trump administration would argue at this moment in time that we are not in a war. They see their Operation Epic Fury as being concluded. I think we all have probably a different assessment of that. It does seem to be that the memorandum of understanding is off the table, is now void and null, and that we are back to at least a pretty steady cadence of strikes and counterstrikes. Even though CENTCOM did take a few days off from striking Iran, I don't expect that trend to continue. I do think that the war will continue on for some time. I am hopeful that negotiations, that we will all return to negotiations sometime here over the next few months. But I think, unfortunately, right now, both countries are seeking to raise the costs of this war for each other so that they have a better position at the negotiating table the next time they meet. And right now, I don't see an end in sight to that.
Well, Elizabeth Dent, Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute and former Director for the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula and the Pentagon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.